It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, and we're nervously awaiting the return of Sisko and Dax. They went off to talk to Starfleet Command about the now ongoing Klingon war, and they only took a mega shuttle. Not a great idea with enemy ships around, which might be why it's a tiny bit on fire when it manages to get here. Unlucky things, these mega shuttles. That fire on the Rio Grande looks exactly like the one we saw on the Volga 2 episodes back. Nobody's injured though, so maybe it's a feature rather than a design flaw, the starship equivalent of a crumple zone or some shit. Anywho, Sisko and Dax are back and they bring news. The Klingons are giving us a proper kicking and expending resources on both sides in the process. That's understandable when you remember Odo told us he believes Gowron, boss lad of the Klingons, is a founder infiltrator. That's why Starfleet are going to send a team to prove it, hopefully ending the war. And by team, they do, of course, mean us. It is our show after all. Odo's invited to the inevitable meeting, an invite that becomes an order when he tries to get out of it due to his depression about no longer being able to change shape. Long story short, we've been tasked with going to the best defended area of Klingon space, one protected against cloaked ships by the way, getting past Gowron's personal bodyguard and then proving he's a founder. The blood test is out of the question for a few reasons, not least of which that it obviously doesn't work if he's been a fake for a while, as the Klingons take such things very seriously. Luckily, we do have another way of proving it. No, they're not thermal detonators from Star Wars, but actually some science gizmos that, when triggered together, bugger up any changeling around who's in humanoid form. Unfortunately, they do this by spitting out radiation that'll be fatal for everybody else if fired more than once, so we'll only get a single shot at it. On the plus side, they do cover a pretty wide area, so we'll only have to get near. We're calling in favours to make that happen, which means convincing Seagull Dukat to let us use the Klingon ship he nicked last season. It's only fair, as Kira's the one who did most of the work nicking it, and getting rid of Gowron will probably end the Klingon invasion of Cardigan space to boot. Being part of whatever stops that particular unpleasantness will likely net him a significant reward, despite him having gone rogue. Of course, a handful of lads from DS9 strolling around a secure Klingon military base is going to attract a few odd looks once we get there. Thankfully, we also have a solution for that. Damar Dawson Biggs, Seagull Dukat's underling, thinks this whole thing is a fool's errand and we should just nuke the place once we get there. The rest of us point out that the target is both heavily shielded and well defended, meaning that the only people who'd do it dead if we opened fire are us. Instead, we're creating fake ID to squirt into their computers once we get there, files that list us as recipients of awards to be presented by Gowron himself. That'll take care of getting near him. Or maybe not. Just looking the part isn't enough. If they're going to fit in, they'll have to act like Klingons too. Sisko proves that he's up to the task by twatting Worf, though did also accidentally challenge him to a death match in the process. O'Brien and Odo are far less convincing, and that leaves the latter worried that he's not up to such tasks now that he doesn't have his shape-shifting abilities. Sisko's attempt to bolster his confidence is interrupted by an alarm as we've been approached by another Klingon ship. The good news is Seagull Dukat's rigged a holographic video overlay for just such occasions. The bad news is it chooses now to stop working. Worf offers to step in, though Seagull Dukat chooses to instead just poop green at it until the ship kabooms and then scarper. Not exactly stealthy, but this is the season premiere, so we need something to explode. Scarpering results in us reaching a Klingon planet sometime after. It's our destination and where we'll meet Gowron. It's also where Seagull Dukat's going to leave us and bugger off. By his logic, either we'll succeed and the Klingons won't be at war with us anymore, or we'll fail and be slowly murderized. To be fair to him, he does have a point. Over we teleport and subsequently find ourselves in a large room filled with Klingons getting completely wankered. Fitting in means joining them, so I guess we're doing that. It's not a particularly appetizing prospect when all of their current boasts are about killing Starfleet lads, and Sisko knocks one on his arse for bragging about murderizing someone he knew, then plays it off as a joke. It gets easier as the night goes on, helped somewhat by the fact that we've taken medical measures against getting shit-faced and everybody else in the room hasn't. It gets a little hairy when Martok, husband of Cirella, arrives as he's met Sisko before. Curiously, it's O'Brien that he says looks familiar to him, but some bluffing gets him out of it. Similar bluffing fixes things when Odo drops his gizmo, those spheres that'll prove Gowron's a changeling, which is handy as he's just turned up. Less handy is some random schmuck being where Odo needs to put the gizmo to cover the room, so he fixes it Klingon style by just shoving the guy out of the way. Everybody else has got their set, so it's time for Sisko to trigger them, or would be if Martok, husband of Sorella, hadn't just called his Klingon name to come and be decorated. Rather than just press a button and solve all of their problems, Sisko decides to walk up onto the platform instead. Gowron pins a badge on him and he moves to leave, but the blunt end of a batleth to his spine prevents him from pressing the button he could have pressed a few seconds back. The batleth is held by Martok, husband of Sorella, as it would appear he's finally recognized Sisko after all. We're all in a prison cell when Martok, husband of Sorella, comes to visit. He dismisses the guards before talking to us, which is a bit weird, but that gives us a chance for an open conversation on Gowron being a founder. He makes all the right noises for not believing us, but he isn't very convincing about it. That he says Gowron made sure to destroy the gizmos that could have proven it probably doesn't help. Thing is, Martok, husband of Sorella, has known Gowron for years, and lately has noticed some changes. Gowron's the one who halted the attack on DS9 after all, and now he's completely changed his mind and started a war. All well and good to begin with, because that's what Martok, husband of Sorella, wanted, but now Gowron's ignoring all advice and pressing costly attack after costly attack. It's Martok, husband of Sorella himself, that suggests there's only one way to be sure: kill Gowron. Feels like a bit of a shit deal for Gowron if he really is Klingon, and quite the change of heart for Martok, husband of Sorella. Worf suggests he could have challenged Gowron to combat and killed him at any time, but Martok, husband of Sorella, turns this idea down, without any explanation. No, he says we'll be the ones who go and kill Gowron after he releases us. Our escape involves Martok, husband of Sorella, killing quite a few guards, so he's clearly not got any qualms about murderizing people who are just doing their jobs instead of Gowron. We find ourselves back at the gathering hall and everybody runs in, except Odo, who's prevented from doing so by Martok, husband of Sorella, as he says Odo can't be trusted. We march up to Gowron, and upon seeing us, and quite rightly wondering what the fuck is going on, Worf attacks him. Some others try to join in until Gowron tells everybody but Worf to drop their weapons. If Worf wants to challenge him, then he's willing to accept. All of which confuses Martok, husband of Sorella. He can't understand why Sisko hasn't just shot the bastard and had done with it, which Odo considers a curious attitude for a Klingon. In fact, Gowron's the one exhibiting Klingon behavior by telling his guards to stand down and meeting the challenge himself. It's a far cry from somebody freeing prisoners and telling them to kill a guy, which is distinctly dishonorable now he thinks about it. The wrestling match with Gowron is drawing to a close, with Worf as the winner, but as he's about to finish the job, Odo shouts for him to stop. He's fighting with Martok, husband of Sorella, as he's figured out Gowron wasn't the founder infiltrator after all. Fake Martok, fake husband of Sorella, decides a good time to show off his shape-shifting abilities is during a fight in front of a group of armed Klingons. The result is as predictable as it is messy. Gowron's in a good mood. That's understandable when we've just saved not only his life but also the entire Klingon Empire, though he's still not 100% behind stopping the war. A reminder from Sisko that this is what the Founders want gives him pause, and he says he'll suggest a ceasefire for now, then see what happens. He's in less of a good mood with Worf. Being beaten in front of everybody else can't be good for the old ego, and he makes it clear that Worf is even more on his shit list now than he was before. Back to the station we go, courtesy of a space taxi provided by Gowron. Fixing our faces is a relatively simple thing, so much so that Bashir offers to give Odo anyone he likes. He declines, possibly because it's the last link he has to his people, so we'll leave René Auberjonois to swap one latex appliance for another until the next adventure. Well, that solves that then. A mission deep into enemy territory, one sufficiently audacious enough for them to admire us trying to pull it off, and we've sewn up our business with the Klingons. Well, sort of. Nobody's made any actual promises, so we leave open the possibility of some future unpleasantness, but the show has aimed us firmly back in the direction of the Dominion being the real problem. It's doubled down on that, in fact. Now we know the Founders are willing to employ Odo in parts of their schemes. The image of Gowron was a deliberate plant by them to facilitate this whole plan. Not that it was originally going to be, by the way. It wasn't until this episode was being put down on paper that the writers decided to switch things around. Season 4 ended with every intention of Gowron being a Founder spy, but it was decided not to kill him off and risk upsetting fans. That's a curious line of thinking when it wasn't really Gowron, and we'll soon see why there were ways around it. But for now, we'll simply say that switching things to Martok, husband of Cirella, was probably the right choice from a narrative point of view. It made the conclusion more of a surprise, retained the conflict between Worf and Gowron, and painted the Founders as deliciously Machiavellian gits. It also ties into a comment made in Season 3 about the Klingons and the Federation being the only serious problems for the Founders now, and that being something they've taken measures to deal with. The episode gives us some further data though. We've now essentially confirmed that the blood screening tests don't work. That's something suggested by Sisko's own dad last season, along with the way that he'd have fooled it, which leaves us with one less weapon in our arsenal against spies. We can't even use the knockoff thermal detonators as a permanent solution, due to the writers having enough forethought to make them a one-use thing. Speaking of which, fair play to whoever thought of including Chekhov's spheres and then never using them. The relatively short runtime of Trek stories rarely has such things turn out to be a red herring, so it's nice to see them now and again. It's not the only pleasing little touch in this one, though. Having Kira mock argue with Bashir about it being his fault she's pregnant is another. For those unaware, Alexander Siddig was the father of Nana Visitor's baby, so the in-joke was a fun addition. Third is the appearance of Seagull Dukat. When he visits the station, he's bedecked with trophies he's gathered while faffing about in a nicked bird of prey. The aesthetics of it are fun enough, though it's also perhaps a deliberate attempt to show him as exactly the sort of vainglorious egotist that he's fighting against. It doesn't take much to imagine him boasting about how he killed their previous owners over a bottle of Kanar, and I suspect his stories would, if anything, be even more fictional than those a Klingon would tell. There's perhaps a fourth nice touch in this one as well, though it's possibly just a coincidence. As Odo sits in Quark's bar and either distracts himself from his depression or wallows in it, I'll let you decide, he entertains himself with a drink. He says it's for the bubbles, the sound pleasing to him, but is it a coincidence that he chooses a golden liquid pretty close to that of a changeling's natural form? Given the variety of coloured liquids in Quark's bar, the prop department could have chosen something else, though beer might also have been used because the head is a good visual indicator of it being bubbly. Maybe I'm seeing a meaning that was unintentional, but it's a good idea, if deliberate. We'll end then with something that entertained me far more than it had any right to. I think this magnificent bastard right here may well be my new favourite character in Deep Space Nine. Just look at him. Have you ever seen anybody so absolutely fucking delighted just to be in the room? From the stills I took, I thought he looked a wee bit like Weird Al Yankovic, so I looked into it further. The answer is no, as he's played by Tom DeMille, who had a handful of uncredited appearances in Deep Space Nine. However, that particular rabbit hole led me to discover that, by a curious coincidence, Weird Al did play a Klingon in the video for the song Where No Man's Been Before, with spoof pop star L.B. Rain for Doog Tunes. I've included a link to it in the description, though I'd warn you that there were perhaps some dubious makeup choices for Al. It does prove one thing, though. Nobody will put as much effort into taking the piss out of Star Trek as people who like Star Trek. End of episode.
Wow, all of that dicking around and we've ended up right back where we started.
Well, what did you expect? It's Star Trek.
Fair point.
It's not a complete loss, though, is it? I mean, we're out of that post-timeline bubble we were in for a start.
I'm not going to miss having to write all of those names out with chalk.
Probably just as well when you buggered it up.
I did not bugger it up.
You did though, didn't you?
I'm not going to entertain this conversation.
I reckon the viewers would argue not being entertained is the theme for these videos.
We're back to bashing the guy who makes these then?
Too bloody right. That dickhead's been telling us he can't pay us for years, and all this time it's been to fund his Pringles stash.
What a masterful recap.
Thank you very much.
So what are we going to do about it?
Well, first things first, we gotta figure a way to get out of here.
You mean Deep Space Nine?
No, son. I mean his computer. Woof.